You get invited to a colleague's wedding in Tokyo, and the first thing you do isn't buy a gift. You go to the bank. You need 30,000 yen in bills so new they're almost stiff, folded into a special envelope, because a worn note is an insult. That's before the venue, before the rented tuxedo, before you learn the reception seats 700 people, and none of them will dance. Average couples here spend $23,000 on one day. No dancing, not once. So how does a room that big, that expensive, hold together 3 straight hours? In America, that budget buys a wedding where someone's uncle eventually embarrasses the whole family on a dance floor. Here, there's no floor to embarrass anyone on. Start with the money, because everything else in a Japanese wedding sits on top of it. That 30,000 yen envelope isn't a gift the way an American guest would think of one. It's closer to a ticket, and almost everyone in the room bought the same one. A 2024 industry survey put the average Japanese wedding at 3.44 million yen, right around $23,000. And the same survey found couples pull back nearly that entire amount from the room itself, because every guest who walks through the door hands over cash. Multiply 30,000 yen by 50 guests, and you're already near $1.5 million yen in gift money alone. More if the list runs into the hundreds. The couple isn't just hosting a party, they're running a single night where the attendees fund most of it themselves. And everyone in the room already understands that math before they sit down. That math comes with rules, and the rules aren't casual. The bills inside the envelope have to be brand new, uncirculated, straight from the bank that morning, because handing over a wrinkled note suggests you didn't bother preparing. The amount itself gets chosen with something close to superstition. 30,000 is standard for a co-worker. Closer friends might give 50,000, but you will never see 40,000 yen change hands at a wedding, because 4 is pronounced shi, the same sound as the word for death, and 9 gets avoided for a similar reason. Even the count of individual bills matters, since an even number can read as a couple splitting in 2, so the total gets arranged around that too. A guest doesn't check their bank balance and pick a round number. They're solving a small, socially enforced puzzle, and getting it wrong is the kind of mistake people quietly remember. Now picture that etiquette repeated 700 times over, because the guest list on a large Japanese wedding rarely stays inside the family. It's routine for a wedding built around a father's career to fill a hotel ballroom with people the bride and groom barely know personally. Vendors, clients, a boss's boss, business relationships the family once formally acknowledged in a room full of witnesses. Guests get seated by category, relatives at one block of tables, co-workers at another, college friends somewhere else entirely, because mixing the groups would flatten the whole point of the seating chart. The room stops looking like a party and starts looking like an org chart wearing linen tablecloths. Name cards sit at every seat, printed in advance, table by table, because nobody wants a co-worker accidentally seated with a client, or a distant cousin accidentally seated with nobody they know at all. Someone spent an entire evening building that chart on a laptop weeks before the wedding, treating the seating plan with the same seriousness an event planner might give a corporate conference, because in a sense, that's exactly what it is. There's an older version of this system worth knowing too, because it explains why the whole night still feels supervised. For generations, Japanese weddings ran through a nakodo, a formal matchmaker who didn't just introduce the couple, but stood beside them through the ceremony and gave the opening speech at the reception, effectively vouching for both families in public. Actual matchmaking has mostly faded out of modern Japan, but the role hasn't disappeared so much as it's been absorbed. Today, a senior boss or a trusted relative often fills that exact slot, standing where the nakodo used to stand, opening the speeches the nakodo used to open. The job outlived the job title. Before any of that seating happens, though, there's usually a ceremony first, and it's smaller and quieter than everything that follows. Some couples marry in front of a Shinto priest at a shrine, exchanging 3 cups of sake each in a ritual called sansankudo, close family only, maybe 20 minutes total. Others choose a chapel built specifically for weddings, officiated by someone hired for the role, no church attached to it at all. A format that borrows the white dress and the aisle walk without borrowing the religion underneath them. Either way, it's brief, private, and almost incidental compared to what's coming. The real event, the one with 700 chairs in it, hasn't even started yet. Here's where the first real surprise sits, because you'd expect a room that formal to loosen up once the champagne starts pouring. It doesn't. Guest after guest, in account after account, describes bracing for a late night on the dance floor and instead sitting through a 2 to 3 hour seated banquet run on a printed schedule managed by a hired MC who calls each phase of the night like a stage director. No dance floor gets built at all. Not a small one, not a symbolic one tacked onto the end. The order of events simply never includes it, because a Japanese reception was never built around movement in the first place. It was built around being watched. That's the actual function of the night, and it explains everything that follows. A Japanese reception isn't primarily a celebration of 2 people falling in love. It's a formal introduction of 2 families and 2 professional networks to each other, staged in front of the people who matter to both. That's why the heaviest moments belong to speeches, not music. The groom's boss usually speaks first, because in a room organized by hierarchy, the most senior professional relationship earns the most senior slot on the schedule. Parents speak, colleagues speak, careful the entire time to avoid a small list of banned words, anything implying cutting, ending, or separation, because even language is treated as something that can jinx a marriage. And near the close of the night, in one of the traditions still standard at almost every Japanese wedding, the bride reads a handwritten letter to her own parents, thanking them for raising her, and the room, by nearly every account on record, quietly comes apart in tears. If you're picturing pure solemnity by now, you're only getting half the night. The reception runs warm and rigid at once, both at the same time on the same schedule. Between the formal speeches, friends of the couple usually perform something lighter, a song, a skit, occasionally something built entirely around embarrassing the groom in front of his own boss. One guest described friends dressed as anime characters, singing about what a nerd the groom used to be, the parents laughing along in the front row. So the structure never really relaxes. It just makes room for warmth inside the structure, on a schedule, at a specific point on the printed program, and then moves on to the next name on the list. Through all of it, food keeps arriving on a clock. A full multi-course meal is standard, French or Japanese, plated and timed against the speeches. And it's never served in a set of 4 courses. For the exact same reason, the cash envelopes skip that number. You're eating in a rented tuxedo or a rented kimono, listening to a man you've never met describe the character of a co-worker you barely know. And somewhere around course 5, you understand why nobody built a dance floor. There was never a gap in the schedule, for one. Somewhere in the middle of all that, the bride usually disappears. Japanese receptions build in at least 1 costume change, sometimes 2. The white dress swapped for a color one, occasionally a full traditional kimono with an elaborate updo redone from scratch in under 20 minutes by a team waiting backstage for exactly that job. The room doesn't pause for it. The MC simply announces the next segment, the lights shift, and she reappears, looking like a different bride than the one who walked in an hour earlier. It's staged, it's timed, and it works precisely because nobody in the room is surprised by it. You've seen the same reveal at every wedding you've been to since you moved here, and you still find yourself watching for it. And even after 3 hours of speeches, food, and costume changes, the night usually isn't finished. Close friends and co-workers peel off afterward to a nijikai, a second, cheaper, far looser after-party at a nearby bar or karaoke room. No seating chart, no MC, no envelope required at the door, beyond a flat fee to cover the room. This is where the dancing you kept expecting all night finally happens. If it happens at all, usually badly. Usually to a karaoke machine, usually led by whichever co-worker had the least self-control at the open bar. The formal wedding bought the families their ceremony. The nijikai is where the couple's actual friends get their party back, and it's the one part of the night that never shows up in any survey, any ledger, or any envelope math, because nobody's counting anymore by that point. By the time the reception winds down, there's one more transaction waiting, and it runs in the opposite direction from the envelope you handed over at the door. Every guest leaves with a hikidemono, a return gift, usually something practical, sweets, tableware, or sometimes a catalogue where you pick your own item later at home. Modest on purpose, priced against what you gave so the exchange never tips too far in either direction. You paid for your seat with a superstition-proof envelope of new bills. You walk out with a small, specific thank you that cost the couple a fraction of what you handed them. The math evens out, roughly, by design, and everyone in the room already knew that going in. You notice the weight of that hikidemono bag more than you expect to, walking back to the train afterward. The gift inside isn't what makes it heavy. It's the proof. A night built entirely out of envelopes, seating charts, and timed speeches balanced itself out in the end, exactly the way it was designed to from the very first invitation. And that's the detail that actually explains the 700 guests, more than the money ever could. A wedding at that scale measures how many relationships two families are formally putting on record, all at once, in front of each other, with a receipt. A boss invited is a debt acknowledged. A client invited is a partnership marked in public. Every name on that seating chart is a small, precise statement about where the couple and their parents actually stand inside a network that extends well past the two people getting married. 700 people in a ballroom is a ledger, dressed in white, read out loud over 3 hours of speeches nobody's allowed to skip. Which brings you back to the question this whole night is quietly built to answer, without ever saying it out loud. If you sat through a wedding like that, $23,000 spent, 700 names checked off, every envelope counted, and every seat assigned to the right table, would you still call it a celebration? Or would you call it the most polite, most expensive ledger you've ever sat through in a rented tuxedo? Maybe it's both at once. Somewhere between the boss's opening speech and the bride's letter to her own parents, the accounting stops being the point, even if, on paper, it never actually closes.